probably
What,
tomorrow.
babe? Okay, what?
I would ask everyone to, unless you're going to be speaking, please mute yourself. I would appreciate that. We would appreciate that. You might also put it on speaker view, your Zoom, just because it's going to be hard to see um, the main speakers unless you do that probably.
Where is that at?
Occasionally, I may go and mute everybody, like I just did. A watched clock never changes. Did you know that? All right, I have 7 o'clock according to somebody that's higher authority than myself. Welcome. My name is Jim Noble. I am the treasurer, CFO of the MidTexas Conference, and want to welcome you all. And there'll probably be some others popping on right now. We have 53 folks who have joined us, and my aim in this hour is probably certainly not to cover every possible scenario, but kind of in general, we have a wide swath of course, sizes of churches and locations of churches and insurance sort of situations with churches. And so property insurance has really become a kind of a really challenging area in the last 5 years or so. And I want to just ask you to please, if you have questions, put them in the chat, and I will be watching those questions. I'm going to kind of guide the discussion. But the two main folks who have joined us, who are experts, much more experts in this area than I am, are Robert Kent, and Robert is with Kent Family Insurance Group in the Houston area, and his wife Susan is a GMC pastor, and wonderful. And Robert has been doing this for a long time, and it runs in the family. He was telling me a minute ago, and he can answer some of these questions. And then also Stan Gregory is with us, and Stan is of course married to our conference superintendent and Bishop Leah Hitty Gregory. And Stan is an expert in analyzing buildings and insurability, and that's what he does. He drives around and does risk assessments for insurance companies. And so that's kind of where we're gonna go there. Now, I will have certainly Robert give his contact information probably at the end several times so that you can reach out to him. He's also prepared a sheet. I'll let him talk about that in a minute that you can get via a link he's going to share in the chat as well. That's just kind of some general good information. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Robert to start on this. So in general, I guess, what in the world is going on in property insurance, Robert? It has changed pretty drastically in the last few years, and if you can kind of give us a view on that to start us off, that would be amazing. Thank you. You're muted. I muted you probably. Sorry.
Yep, I just turned it off.
Yeah,
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate everybody's time tonight. Kind of where we are, where we've been over the past couple of years is nothing short of kind of a perfect storm where you've got a lot of property issues. You've got weather-related things that are going on with churches. You have churches that are aging. churches that are not necessarily close to fire stations, particularly some of the smaller, more rural churches. You've got inflation has really kicked in, that's caused the cost of any kind of property claims to escalate, magnitudes that the industry has really never seen before. Um, where this kind of passion built for me, with my insurance agency, I've with my wife being in ministry, it's been a part of where my heart is to help churches. But it really came to light about a year ago. My wife was given the opportunity to preach at the Trinity annual conference last June. And as I was sitting in the ladies session, and my wife was next door in the clergy session, representative from one of the churches raised their hand and said, "Hey, what can be done about church insurance?" And it really struck a chord for me. And I went and visited with our now superintendent, who's been an old friend over the last decade or so to both Susan and myself. And I'm like, this is a space I play in every day. It's kind of my ministry per se. And I'd love to create an environment, create a forum where I could help churches just understand what's going on. As I mentioned, the perfect storm with all the weather related things. On top of that, you've got carriers that have said thank you, no thank you, to a lot of churches. Some of you have probably experienced that, and just really scratching your head, going, okay, I've never had a claim before, but now they're non-renewing me. Why is this? It doesn't make sense. And frankly, a lot of the moves that some of the carriers are making haven't made sense. I've heard of one that is literally non-renewing policies if a church had a legal name change in the last 3 years. Guess what? All of us did when we disaffiliated from the UMC. So, that kind of puts us all on the radar. All our churches that I'm speaking, from the congregation that I'm a member of and my wife's pastor of. But fundamentally, it's boiling down to what are the real risks that the insurance carriers are looking at. Stan can probably speak to this as well, but you're looking at some of the churches are aging. We see a lot of carriers saying if a church structure is more than 50 years old, they won't even consider it. Some are even tighter than that. So there's a lot of underwriting restrictions. The cost of rebuilding churches has skyrocketed. One of the contractors that I work with is one of our insureds. I was just asking about labor cost, and he was saying pre-COVID you could find a really good laborer that was probably $20 an hour, his labor rate. Now coming out of COVID and obviously several years beyond it, you can't really even get just a bottom end labor person, kind of just to even talk to them. Just somebody starting out won't even talk to you unless it's like $35 or $40 an hour. So there's a flat double in labor cost, which that's going to be factored into it, as well as inflation on building materials and the cost of shingles and the cost of 2x4s and all that. One of the ministries that I do outside of work is Army. Some of y'all have been affiliated with that, and I know building wheelchair ramps for some of the underprivileged in some of these communities. The cost of building a ramp today is 2 and 3 times just a material cost of what it was just a handful of years ago, not even a full handful. So it's just all these things are compounding. Age of churches. There's a lot of carriers that look at stained glass windows that many of y'all may have, and go, yep, that's too much risk. I don't want that anymore. And there has to be special provisions there. Old wiring has become a real hot button issue for a lot of the carriers. Just back in December, First Methodist Marshall, Texas, had significant damage caused by an electrical fire.
Yeah.
That just nothing. So we're seeing more and more of those things. And with the carriers, the way a lot of carriers, Church Mutual, Brotherhood Mutual are kind of the two big names. Throw Guide One in there as well, but a lot of their pricing, depending on the size of the church and the amount of premium that the carrier would bring in where they would rating a risk. They had a little bit different underwriting standards. I know Church Mutual. I've talked to several churches where Church Mutual, and it was smaller policies, and Church Mutual would just accept everybody regardless of the risk. Well, that puts everybody, all the other churches, kind of at risk, because now you've got you've got a church that may not have necessarily taken care of their property. They weren't good stewards, and now they're causing that risk to flow over to some of the other clients.
And Robert, most of us have come from a world, and we talked about this earlier, but where Church Mutual insured us as, at the conference level,
Yes.
kind of any church, or, maybe a parsonage, conference parsonage or whatever. And I know Church Mutual broke that in the former Rio, Texas, and I think
Yeah.
do you ever see that coming back where they would even consider, pooling 200 churches together and covering them?
I would seriously doubt it. I'm not a betting man, but if I was, it would not be in favor of it coming back. Just what I hear from underwriters, the way those policies were constructed, back when they were just cheap, and the coverage wasn't necessarily worth the paper that it was written on. If you kind of understand what I'm saying there, but the amount of premium that the carrier was bringing in was not sufficient enough to pay for any claims that were coming out. And the way a lot of the policies, and some of y'all may have noticed it over the years, there's normally some kind of indexing in the coverage. And we see that, not just in churches, but other commercial properties where a policy may be enforced for 5, 10, 15 years, and there's really no adjustment in the coverage amount. So what the valuation of the building is, it's in the homeowners marketplace, that's kind of done naturally, but in the commercial space, not much. And so it's up to the agent to kind of keep up with new valuations, new property assessments and things like that, to make sure that you do have the proper amount of coverage. Because if you say, okay, the building's worth $500,000, but the true cost to rebuild it's $1.5 million, you're taking premium on $500,000. Where's the extra money going to come from to cover that additional $1 million in property valuation?
Okay.
So those are just some of the things. We've seen a lot of churches file just really small claims, where they may have been better off just doing a small repair, a glass breakage, so a window broke. Okay, we're going to file a property claim. Well, that's going to stay on your record with that carrier for 5 to 7 years, just depending on how far back they look. Where it may have been better from a because now you have that cost on that claim on the policy, and they're going to index the premium the next year. Well, the premium may have increased more than what it was to fix the window.
Yeah.
And so we see decisions like that. Underwriting restrictions, reinsurance. The companies like Lloyd's of London, they're one of the largest reinsurance company, and that's where an insurance carrier will buy an insurance policy against a block of their business, so a number of policies, and they call that reinsurance, and that it's specifically used for catastrophic events in a region, or maybe even across the country. A lot of those carriers have tightened their restrictions, and now the carriers that we would all deal with, now the cost to buy that policy is triple, quadruple, even quintuple over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. So it just a lot of things have impacted, and it's caused the carriers, the church mutuals, the brotherhoods, the guide ones, the Phillies, the USLIs, kind of name it, who does property coverage in Texas, to really say, you know what, I'm
I'm gonna mute, Robert. I'm gonna mute
yeah,
everybody and just unmute yourself. There you go.
sure, yeah, it's caused a lot of these carriers to just really take a step back and have to reevaluate, down to really the zip code level, where it used to be kind of broad swaths of geography. They would say, okay, well, this set of counties, we're not going to, we'll have coverage, but it'll be, these restrictions. Now they're getting down to literally the zip code. There's one church I was talking to a couple of weeks ago, and the carrier literally made the decision: in this zip code, we're non-renewing all policies.
Wow.
But the zip code just adjacent to it, they're fine.
Interesting.
Yeah, so
Okay, so we
it's
don't
been
see,
an interesting dynamic for sure.
yeah. So we don't see, I think maybe you've seen a tiny bit of loosening over the constricture of the last year or so, but we don't see any wide kind of reopening of the glory days, anytime soon.
No,
Yeah.
no. There's a couple different levels of carriers that we talk to, and so I've referenced the church mutuals, guides ones, Philly, USLI. Those are typically what we call admitted carriers, and so they're the brand names everybody kind of knows of in the space, um, and they're the ones that have the backing of the state insurance pool. So they've all gone to Texas Department of Insurance and say, we want to be an admitted carrier in the state. And so if something happens to that insurance carrier, the state insurance pool will back it and to make sure
Okay.
that claims are paid out. Beyond that, you've got a whole host of other carriers that they call it just insurance speak, the surplus line or E&S. Those are carriers that are non-admitted, so they don't have that backing by the state insurance pool. So there's a little bit different dynamics between those two. But the admitted carriers are really shying away from the property element of it right now. And one of the things that I think the industry has done that's a disservice to churches over the years is they've sold a policy, just a policy, and it has different elements to it. So there's property, there's general liability, there's professional liability, there's directors and
Yeah.
officers coverage, there's management liabilities, all these different elements of it, but it's sold as a package. And so it's conditioned us as church leaders to think that, okay, I've got to take it as it is, when in reality, you can break up that bundle and you can have one carrier, if they're the best for the general liability and maybe pastoral liability, that they may have a bundle that's really strong. Somebody else may have something that's more the management, so it's the directors and officers and employment practice liability. Throw some cyber liability in there. That's been kind of a hot topic lately. And then property is a standalone piece.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a lot of situations where those type may happen. Sometimes they'll bundle all the liability stuff together and keep property separate. And the way a lot of the admitted carriers are really addressing the property coverage piece of it, and a lot of them, like I said, shying away from it. We do the general liability with those admitted carriers, make sure that if there's a slip and fall accident, Mrs. Jones walking across the parking lot, she trips over a parking stop. We want to make sure that the church is protected and can take care of her. And really all those situations, God forbid, a congregant get irritated at what a pastor says on a Sunday morning. And he or she was talking, a little too close to home, and I'm going to file a complaint.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we've seen it happen. That's kind of how
Now,
ludicrous some of these situations are. But
is fire casualty still, is it kind of separate from wind and hail, or is there still a problem in the fire as well?
A little bit in the fire, particularly with the older structures,
Okay.
the older church buildings and older parsages, things like that. Ones that haven't been updated from the electrical standpoint. Wildfire risk is still out there in
Yeah,
some
right.
some communities. So so yes, that's all part of the property piece, and you'll see that priced in depending once again on the zip code.
Okay.
Those are that are a little bit more rural, don't have the close proximity to fire hydrants or fire stations. We see a little bit higher premium on those. Certainly, the wind and hail closer to the coast. Some of the more southern churches, you're going to get more of the tropical weather related risks that are built in.
Yeah.
Obviously, where I am outside of the Houston area, we see quite a bit of that, but all up and down the Gulf Coast. If you're anywhere close to 2 or 3 counties away from the coast, then you're going to be susceptible to that. You probably depending on if it's and kind of looking at the geography of the state, there's a band in the kind of the Dallas area, there's a band in the Houston area where higher than not likelihood that you're going to see a hail event. We've seen that increasing. So the wind from tropical, the wind from tornadic activity, the hail, the fire, the wildfire, all those things really boil down to zip code to zip code.
Okay. Good. Switch gears just a tad, and Stan. So again, what Stan does kind of for a living is looks and examines the risk associated with church buildings and I think some other buildings as well. Stan, what would be some of your top kind of recommendations as far as what you look for that's good or that's risky? And shoot.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Jim.
You bet.
Yeah, a lot of things that because I actually go out to the properties and I look at everything from little mom and pop restaurants to 1 million square foot manufacturing facilities, anything in between. But I look at a lot of the churches, and so the carriers are. And I just looked at one in Palestine not too long ago with the construction. It was fairly new construction. Uh, but it was noted it had ephes, which is an exterior insulated finish on the exterior. And it was a metal structure, but it had ephes siding. And the underwriter was wanting them to do something about that because it's a combustible construction, and they weren't liking that it had ephes on it, and they were saying that they weren't going to write the policy. But luckily, the church, the bottom 4 feet of the church was bricked, so it has less damage if it's on the upper part, with the ephes and stuff. So the construction to maintain it, they're looking for pilled, paint, things like that, that you maintain it, and also, the roofing, they want to know about updates, what type of roofing on it, how old it is. And that goes with all the components, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, things like that. And it's big, like Robert had said on the electrical part. If you have an older building, I have to make a recommendation that they replace the electrical in there if they use certain breakers, in particular, Federal Pacific. If I go in and they have Federal Pacific breakers, it's an automatic. They've got to replace that, or they will drop them on the insurance. So,
And
things like that.
yeah, so and that kind of gets back to Robert, which churches. And I've, been a local pastor. I was a local pastor 14 and a half years, some of you much longer than that. We do ministry and we preach and we serve food and we're not always the best property managers. That was Federal Pacific Breakers. Yeah, Carl.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not always the best property managers. So this is not kind of our wheelhouse, but talk a little bit about the importance of the kind of the record keeping and the maintaining, and kind of when it comes to being insured, how that helps.
Oh, that is a massive piece of the documentation that carriers are looking for today. If you can show that you've got records of, like what Stan was talking about, the air conditioning system, you had updates there, you've had the roof replaced or at least maintained over the years. There's some process and so forth that they can do to enhance the life of a shingle roof, or even some of the urethane roofs on more flat roof. But document when you've done things, when you've done updates. When you change it is as little as changing the batteries on your smoke detectors. If you're a pastor, put that as one of the line items for your trustees to take care of. We're all involved in ministry in some impact or some element of it. It doesn't all have to fall on the senior pastor, of what's going on and kind of how to keep things. Luckily with the GMC, the tenure of pastors is increasing a little bit. It's not the 4 years and move on type thing that we saw in the past. But record keeping is critical. Being able to show an underwriter saying we have taken extra effort to document what we've done to maintain our church. That goes a long way with these underwriters, knowing that they unfortunately see all kinds of situations, but being able to prove to them that you have a procedure for every once a quarter we're going around and we're checking smoke detectors, or what once a year we have an HVAC company come out and do an inspection on our air conditioning systems to make sure that they're maintained, and say a capacitor blows on a condenser unit or even in the evaporator. You're staying on top of those routine maintenance. Stan referenced the peeling paint. These carriers, it used to be in the past where they would say, okay, we're just going to let the church do a self-inspection. Well, now with them increasing their underwriting, they're sending a third-party inspector out to look. Stan's proof positive of that. So they're wanting to look and kind of look at every property with a fine-tooth comb. They want to see the documentation. They want to see that just routine maintenance. There's no mold on the exterior walls. What mold or algae growth. Those are things that they look at as, okay, they've taken, okay, do you have trees that overhang the structure in any way? A wind event come through and a branch breaks off. Is that gonna cause roof damage? Even some of the rooftop, I've got one church up in the Fort Worth area that we've had them just to that element of like, we're taking extra effort. They had 3 claims in 4 years for hail events. Didn't damage the roof of the building, but it damaged the air conditioning system.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to have the rooftop AC units completely rebuilt, completely taken off and redone, replaced. So now what they've done is they've created kind of a shed structure over it, so that if there was hail event again, it's not going to damage the HVAC unit. It's going to damage a sheet metal roof that's
Right.
cheap to replace.
Yeah, right. Good. And kind of, now this is, I'm not, Robert did not ask me to do this, but, some churches are out there kind of fending for themselves, and there are some good agents. You're one, and there are others as well that, that I know of some, and talk about kind of just briefly the role of an agent kind of facilitating and being aware of especially the property, but also the others, but really the property is the main focus.
Mhm.
rather than kind of trying to do this on our own. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Working with churches, understanding ministry is critical. Because you're looking at it from a property standpoint, but if an agent does not understand the inherent risks of certain elements of ministry, um, having church volunteers drive church vans, on the surface you would think, okay, well, that's not that big of a deal, but a lot of those volunteers, that church van is larger than their normal vehicle. So there's inherent risk of them not knowing how to maneuver a larger vehicle where they may have had a small SUV or something, that kind of thing. What are the risks for having an overnight lock-in for the youth? What are the risks of having your a playground for your day school or your Mother's Day Out program? Those are all elements that if the agent doesn't understand that, and is just in the business of selling a policy rather than kind of being a consultant of sorts, being an educator. But if the agent dives in and really understands it, they're gonna serve you and your congregation that much better, because they're gonna understand and kind of be your um I heard it phrased earlier, kind of just a protector, that let the church focus on the ministry that they're put on this earth to do, and God's ordained it, and have the agent kind of look out to make sure that ministry can continue, and the church doesn't have to worry about being blindsided by something.
Good. Now, some churches, understandably, and I've had a few of these conversations, because of the rising costs, particularly on the property and the wind and hail, the rising deductibles. At one time, I think I remember 5,000 per wind and hail event under Church Mutual, and then it went to 1%, and now we're like 5%. And then I even heard, I know of a church where they said we're not doing wind and hail on your main buildings. You have this kind of rising thing. So some churches are talking about, well, should we, and I know some have decided to self-insure when it comes, especially to property damage. And talk about kind of just some of the thinking that goes, or some of the pre-thinking that should go into that decision. I know, it's like you can't use your insurance because then they're gonna cancel you, but kind of what's the risk of not carrying it, and what would you advise on?
Sure. Yeah, obviously, going, and in the insurance world, we call it going bare. But going bare on the property, not having property coverage. If something happened, that's completely on the church. So things to consider is, how much money do you have in the bank, to kind of underwrite if something were to happen. From a budgetary standpoint, I would make sure that in lieu of paying a premium for the property coverage, that you're putting that away, and not just in the general operating budget. You're putting it into more of a savings account, that it's the rainy day fund. One of the things that some of y'all may participate in the Dave Ramsey Financial Peace program. I'm one of the Ramsey Trusted Pros. There's only about 375 of us nationwide, but I kind of endorse the church to make sure that you have some of the basic elements. You have the emergency fund,
Right,
that
right.
in case something happened, and from a deductible management standpoint, yeah, try to get to a point where you're going with a higher deductible, because that's going to keep your premiums down, both on the wind and hail side, but also on the what we call all other perils. And so that's all other perils that might be listed, or causes of loss that might be listed on the policy, and that's the fire, that's the the theft, things like that. Water claims. That's getting back to plumbing updates. Does your church have galvanized plumbing in it? That was, one of the things we haven't mentioned. Or is it more of a PVC or copper scenario?
Right.
Those are much more preferred by the carriers.
Okay.
But do you have money to be able to take care of stuff and not necessarily file a claim? One of the other strategies that we've used, just to kind of manage that deductible. Yeah, you may go on the basic property policy, may go with a 3 or a 5 or a 10% even deductible, but there are other carriers that will only sell a wind policy. So if something happened, a tropical event, hail event, tornadic activity, whatever it might be, they have a policy where you're going to pay a small premium, and that policy, that wind policy, will pay the big deductible. So it's kind of kind of in that betting situation again.
Okay. Yeah. And I think you had mentioned, we talked about this before, and you're kind of getting insurance for the deductible, is what you're
Yeah,
saying, like another
that's
policy to
exactly.
cover.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the rates vary, but you're talking something, 20 to 30 cents on the dollar, something.
It's much smaller. Yeah, there's one of
Okay.
the churches that that I'm currently working with, that they're still with one of the big carriers, kind of on a direct basis. I haven't started working with them on the majority of their policies, but they came to me because when the carrier renewed their policy this past December, they increased the wind and hail deductible from 5% to 10%. Well, that 10% is based on the valuation of the building, which is $8 million. So if they had a wind and hail event, just right off the top, it's $800,000 deductible.
Right.
And they about choked, which rightly so. So now we're saying, okay, well, let's think some alternate strategies so that they don't have to pay the $800,000. They may pay $100,000, and then that would pay for the big lump sum.
And that may be a different carrier altogether, or probably is a different
Absolutely.
carrier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, good. And I see your questions, and we'll get to those here after we cover a little bit of another issue. Switching gears just a little bit too. So again, the different classes, you have, of course, property insurance, you have wind and hail, you have other casualties, and then you have general liability, officers, and those kinds of things. And that's a different conversation. And talk about the importance of and you can break out kind of the ones or whatever, the importance of
Sure.
those kinds of policies that really I think every church should absolutely have.
Absolutely. Yeah. I encourage every church to have a minimum of the liability package. And so that'll include the general liability, and those risks going to be the trip and fall, somebody tripping over the parking stop. It's the kid getting his in the Mother's Day Out program, or the day school, or even Sunday school. They get their hand slammed in the door, and it breaks a finger. Well, that's a general liability claim. That element of it, just and it is, I mean, the name says it all. It's just general liability for the church. Then you get into some of the more specialized liabilities, and that's going to be your pastoral liability. That's going to protect the clergy against any liability situation that may develop, intended or unintended. It could be someone feel uncomfortable in a counseling session, and file a complaint against the church, and that that boils into a lawsuit. It could be someone getting irritated at something said in a sermon. As odd as that sounds, it could be outside of the pastor. It could be some of the sexual malpractice. There's a lot of that, unfortunately, a lot of that activity in churches around the country. liability associated with having a scout troop at your church is something. Some carriers said, and in fact, I've got one that I work with commonly that part of, like I'll move on to directors and officers. This particular carrier, for any church that is or formerly part of the United Methodist denomination, they will not write a directors and officers policy in the state of Texas. And what directors and officers is that's the laity that are making decisions on behalf of the church. So you think your trustees, your admin board, folks like that. And if they make a decision and you don't have a directors and officers policy in place, whoever's making the complaint can literally sue that director or that trustee or that admin board member, any or all, sue them personally, and they have no protection, because in an event like that, their personal liability, their personal umbrella policy, things like that aren't going to kick in, because that's outside of the home. So having some of these elements, employment practice liability is another one that's kind of come in. Someone is disgruntled at work and says, well, they're not following the employment manual. Okay, if you don't have employment or EPL or EPLI coverage, that your church is exposed. So that's another little piece you talked about. How to protect. It's just all these things. Cyber liability has really ramped up with churches over the last several years. I know a church that my wife used to serve. Literally the Monday before Easter 3 years ago, they got attacked by some cyber, I don't even know what to call them, terrorists, operating out of the Ukraine. And they held, I think Holy Week, kind of busy for a lot of church activity, and graphics are up on the screens, and everybody's using computers, and they're sending emails all over the place, and the scurrying around and all that. And think about all that being locked down.
Yeah, they locked it down.
And having no access to it. Even you couldn't bring your personal computer to log into the router because it was damaged as well.
Wow.
All the printers, all the copiers, all those were all networked, and they were all impacted. So the church literally shut down. But because they had a cyber liability policy in place, an outside team came in and took care of everything so the church could continue ministry.
Excellent. We do have
and that's the power of it.
We do have a denominational partnership with Ministry Safe, by the way, just as when it comes to vetting volunteers and all that kind of stuff. I just want to lift that. Most of you are probably aware of that, but I know in some other conferences, I had another conference leader from another part of the country tell me that he thought maybe 30% of their pastors had been through the Ministry Safe training. I said, okay, you got to get on that. So that's one of those things that your insurer is probably going to ask for, what's your child safety policy and that kind of thing. And so
absolutely,
we have a pretty good deal with Ministry Safe. So check that out. So I've had
and is it in writing, or is it just assumed?
Right.
And how often, I know one of the things with us being involved in youth mission is every year safe sanctuary training, and just stressing to the volunteers, stressing the kid, don't put yourself in a one-on-one situation with someone underage. Make sure there's another, at least a third person, but all that. What are your policies and procedures? What's your safe sanctuary training? Are you doing background checks on volunteers, particularly those that are involved in ministry to youth and young kids? Are you any volunteer that's using church vehicles or driving their own vehicle on behalf of doing church work? Are you doing MVR checks on them? you know,
And I
all
know
that
that
kind of stuff.
that is part of the negotiation. A guy in Florida is helping to negotiate kind of our new ministry safe parameters. And I know the driving is
Mhm.
going to be part of that, or he's hoping to get the driving to be part of that. I don't think it has been up to now.
Yeah.
So we've had some questions, and I want to start to address those just a little bit. So talk about playgrounds, and many of our churches have Mother's Day Out or daycares. Some of
Mhm.
them organized underneath the church, nonprofit. Some of them separately organized, and of course that would probably require a different policy. But talk about just playgrounds, and maybe Stan can chime in on this too. Playgrounds and play equipment and fences, and just a brief overview of that, if you would.
Sure, sure. Yeah, and just you had mentioned earlier, I have some resources that are available for everyone, and there's actually 2 documents in that kit per
Okay.
se that specifically address playgrounds, and how to, and they're not from an insurance carrier, they're more from federal agencies that are talking about playground equipment. So some really quality information, but
Will you put that in the chat when you get a second here?
yes,
And
I will do that here shortly.
Stan, what do you look for in a playground
Yeah.
in a day school?
The playground, they're going to want to make sure that the equipment's in good repair. Also, that there's a soft landing, underneath the playground equipment. Whether that's sand or it could be mulch, or in a lot of the larger churches and stuff, they actually have the rubberized uh, stuff underneath it. So as far as playgrounds and stuff. Another thing on the children, with the children's daycare or anything
Yes, sir.
classes and stuff like that, the insurance carriers are going to want to make sure that there's the glass windows in the doors. They'll be looking for that in any of the classrooms.
So you can see in, right? Okay,
Yeah.
or out. Yeah, good. Somebody also asked about um, the renting of facilities, and
Mhm.
this gets to be this is a sticky wicket in some ways, but just briefly, what kind of things do you need to be thinking about, Robert, when it comes to rental of your facilities for, the Lions Club or whatever? I don't know.
Yeah. The big thing there is to make sure that entity, whatever it is, that they have general liability coverage that will extend to your property.
Okay.
If it's even a one-time event, and here's a big one. I've got one of my daughters getting married in about a month, but there is literally wedding insurance, and it's built specifically to protect the venue that the wedding is being done on. So, Uncle Charlie at the reception, he brings in a bottle of whatever and gets a little rowdy and breaks the bathroom door. Well, guess what? That claim is not on the church policy at that point. It's on the event policy. So it's going to pay the church to have things repaired, broken glass. Some of the kids get a little rowdy and get excited in their youth and tend to break things. But any outside entity want to make sure that they have general liability coverage that will extend to the church, and have them provide a certificate of insurance. If you have questions about that, certainly we can help walk through that.
Excellent.
Even do those reviews.
What about a security team? And we do have, of course, with some of the things that have happened, and especially in some larger churches, I know it's formalized. And probably smaller churches like one of the ones I served. I won't name the name, but it was very informal. But you knew there was a very massive security team at that church at all times that maybe wasn't trained like they should have been. So talk about that just briefly, if you would.
That's a great question. What the way carriers look at it is, are the people that are serving in the security capacity, are they trained? So having a local police officer, a local sheriff, constable, whatever, they love that all day long, twice on Sundays. anytime there's an event at the church, just to make sure that there's no things going on that shouldn't be going on. When you start getting into the um, volunteer level, and particularly the volunteers carrying firearms on property, they want to see that those volunteers have been trained, and there's a very specific process for how security is being handled. If the volunteers aren't being trained and all that, the carriers are going to shy away from that all day long. They just don't like that scenario. And I've talked to the underwriters. I'm like, we are dealing with Texas here. Firearms are very prevalent with a lot of church members, and they're going to be packing, even going to Sunday service.
Yeah.
But they still want to see that training. That formalized training and certificates and all that. The best scenario is to get a constable or sheriff or whatever.
Right, and pay them.
And pay them. And the beautiful thing, I know the law enforcement officer that comes and hangs out with us on Sunday mornings, she has become a member of our community, our church community. And we did she's a mom, and for Mother's Day we had her up just like every other mom in the congregation, taking a big family picture on Sunday. So it's definitely a ministry opportunity to extend to your local law enforcement agency.
Okay. I had a question about copyright, but I'm not sure if that's kind of a different area, but it is complicated, Gary. I'll give you that. So I'm trying to think if I know an expert, and I can't say that I really do. Robert, do you know anything about?
I know enough to be dangerous.
Okay, yeah.
So
let me do some research.
I know there was it CCM?
Yeah, CCLI.
CCLI, yeah.
Yeah, CCLI.
If you have that, my understanding is you're in good shape.
That's that may be a topic of another one of these, frankly, because I'm gonna look into that, because it gets really, Gary, it gets really sticky with who, where the song is licensed. Does CCLI cover it? And then, like, if you're showing clips, especially of TV shows versus movies, that's a whole different thing. Movies, I think, are much harder to get licensed, or vice versa. I can't remember. And so
even live stream of your church service.
Yes.
The music being played on the live stream, that even falls into it.
Yeah, so that might be a good. I'll see if I can round up some good experts on that, and maybe just have another one of these. Probably won't be quite as well attended, but I've never, I have
Ben,
not.
That's a good comment about the CCLI and CBLI.
I have not known of any prosecutions in that arena, but that doesn't mean that they couldn't. You know what I mean? So I dug into it for, I don't know, a couple days a few years ago, and it was like, man, your head's just spinning, depending on you host a movie night, or you do this or whatever, and the music, and yeah. Good. Okay, what other questions around the property insurance? Anybody have a particular situation that, if I didn't cover the other ministry safe versus safe gatherings, I don't think it matters, Robert. And I think it's still the trustees that, or the one board maybe, but the trustees that probably would need to make sure that other staff folks, in all likelihood, whether it's the clergy or the youth people or the children's people or whatever, are following through on all that. We have a kind of a ministries coordinator, here at the church where I worship and where I office, and she is kind of the point person for all the, who's been through Ministry Safe and who hasn't, and who needs to, and all that kind of stuff. And she has that documented. Of course, Ministry Safe documents it, but she keeps track of, especially when people are moving in or out, who needs to go and get background checked, who needs to have the training,
Mhm.
and in my experience at least, and this is just Jim Noble speaking and not Mid-Texas, but Ministry Safe is just 1,000 times more pleasant than Safe Gatherings was to me. That's just my opinion. So, um, and it's effective. So, any other comments on that, Robert?
Yeah, we've my wife has kind of spearheaded a lot of these trainings for both youth, but also for some international travel, international mission trips in the past, and those trainings she kind of ended up building a presentation just to make it a little more
Yeah.
palatable. It can be harsh.
And
Um,
one thing to think about that in that area too, that was really news to me a few years ago when we kind of started really focusing on this is, of course, you think about youth and children, and sometimes people will tell me, well, we don't have any children, we don't have any youth. Well, no, it's not just that, it's vulnerable adults as well. And
yeah.
I'm sure all of you can think of scenarios of children taking care of parents or, relatives and the neglect and this kind of thing. And so,
Mhm.
um, those vulnerable adults need to be protected as well, and Ministry Safe or Safe Gatherings, it kind of goes
Exactly.
through
Yeah.
that also. And that's just a, that we just have to do that. We have to do it for kids and children, but we also have to do it for vulnerable
Yeah.
adults.
And there's so
Uh,
many that are in the kind of that sandwich generation. So we are still caring for our children to some impact, but also we have the aging parents,
yeah.
and and their friends, and are they being taken care of, and put in awkward situations at church that they're not comfortable with, and that neglect and abuse.
And I think, and I'm just saying this, I'm not sure it's exactly right, but I know, like all of us, anybody on this call and anybody who's not on the call, when they see instances of abuse with children and youth, of course, are mandatory reporters. You're a mandatory reporter. You are legally required to report that. But I believe it's the same for vulnerable adults as well. And so if you know of
I think
situations
so.
where an adult is being neglected or abused or taken advantage of, you know, and we don't think about that as much as we probably should. And so just something to be aware of. And the training goes through all that, the Ministry Safe
Yeah.
and gathering. So um, I'm looking for other questions.
Yeah, Jim
So
even blueprint that where
yes,
you and I were participating in together last year.
yes, sir.
Doing even local mission work in your community, and taking care of someone who may not necessarily be a member of your congregation, but going into their home. These programs are going to go into that detail, and obviously try to avoid that if you can, if you can be on the exterior of the house, but
Yeah,
you know, all
good.
those things really should be taken into account.
Robert, will you share your, oh, here we go. Hosting college students for a workday twice a year at a church, I'm
Yes,
assuming.
yes.
So they would not be organized in their own kind of thing. That would be volunteers, I guess. What would you say about that?
That is something to certainly have a conversation with your agent about, because there some underwriters will want to see some additional documentation. They'll want to make sure that they maybe endorse it for a special event that's going to happen on a specific day and time period.
Yeah.
So it's certainly something to build in. And I'm double checking here, but I think in my resources, yes, I actually in my resource guide, there's 7 or 8 documents that I have in there, but a couple of them are around the playgrounds, as I mentioned, checklist for smoke detectors, fire prevention inspections, I've got a template for an emergency procedures manual. We kind of talked about that. But there's a checklist for sponsored activities, and that's where this would come into play for that local university group, college students, a UM Army, some kind of mission program for the week. If you're sponsoring that, those are things to kind of go through. Just make sure you've got some documentation on it. A lot of those groups, I know, like I'm working with Trinity right now on their summer camp. They're going to go to Lakeview for summer camp, and we've got a specific event policy for those 2 weeks that they're going.
Okay, good. We had a question, and how do we get a 100-plus-year-old church valued? And then I'll add a little bit to that too. What kind of resources would you recommend there?
I would find a local appraiser, property appraiser, and hire them to come do an appraisal on the building.
Okay. I've had somebody tell me before too, and this really comes especially for larger churches, but small ones too. Not a bad idea every year or so to go through with now an iPhone. It used to be a video camera, but an iPhone, and just film all the rooms and the contents of the rooms, because people tend to undervalue when it comes to filing a claim. If there's something catastrophic, people tend to undervalue the contents. Is that would you agree with that, Robert?
I would absolutely agree with that. Yeah, I would make it a just kind of a normal annual procedure, just going through and is filming. But what are the contents look like? In the sanctuary, all through the different buildings or different rooms of the building. What appliances were changed out. And keep as much documentation as you can on that. One of the Wesley foundations that I work with, I was talking to them about there, man. They had just routine procedures that maintenance they had done on the building. They went back literally 20 years on the parsonage for the Wesley director.
Okay. Russ Kaufman asked, and we'll finish with this, and then I did put Robert's email in there, and he put a little bit earlier in the chat, he put his link to get his resource kit. And maybe we can have him repost that as well.
I will do.
What if I guess that's the church, I'm assuming, Russ, we are renting or leasing space. What would we need for insuring the space we rent?
Once again, that's a conversation you would need to have with your agent.
Okay.
To make sure that your policy is going to extend to that other other entity.
Some of us live in parsonages, or did. I used to, and I had an agent tell me many years ago to make sure that I got a renter's policy for my condo.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. So it would be probably something along those lines. If you're keeping stuff there, your worship boxes and kits are rolled into the closet or whatever, you would want to make sure through your agent that those things are insured while they're on that
program. A lot of times, if you're renting a storage facility, the property policy will extend to that other location.
Okay.
But just have the conversation with the agent, because sometimes the underwriter will want to know where that location is. There's one of the ministries that I work. They have an offsite resale shop, and for the holiday season, they rent another space, another retail space just next door in this strip center, and have kind of overflow inventory and things that are in there, but it's just for 6 weeks or 8 weeks during the year. And so the underwriter has said, you know what, we're going to extend to cover that. No need to add a second location. But every underwriter is going to be a little bit different with that and how they do that. So just the best thing that I suggest is have the conversation with your agent, make them aware that these things are going on, and have them have the conversation with the underwriter just to make sure that all that I's are dotted and T's crossed. And it's better to have the conversation now than tomorrow when something happens.
Right. Ryan Barnett, our chief connection officer, chief operation officer, has his hand raised. Ryan, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. That was a finger on the phone that didn't mean to be.
Okay. No problem. No problem.
Nothing like getting called out there, Ryan.
That's okay. We're using his Zoom, so thank you, Ryan, as well, because we're concerned about the limit. So thank you, big thank you to Robert and to Stan as well, and for all of you joining us again. Once this gets saved to the cloud, whatever that is, I know I'm getting older. I don't completely understand the cloud, but anyway, once it's in the cloud, Ryan will share the link with me, and we'll get it up on the web page. And Stan, I'll let Stan answer that question. Stan, would you be willing to share your email with Susan S? It's
Sure.
their personal, it's their home email, so I didn't want to put it out there.
No, that's fine. It's the Gregory family, TheGregory family, FAMILY at att.net.
Thank you, Stan. All right.
Yep.
Thank you all for joining us. And let me close this in prayer. Lord, I thank you for folks like Robert who love and live this, and Stan. And this has been a very traumatic thing for many churches, the rise and the costs and the damaging events and the dropping and all of this. And Lord, we just pray for your provision in this area. And we pray that churches are protected and insured properly, such that we can do the ministry that we are called to do, and are protected in doing so. And thank you for these folks giving up a slice of their Tuesday evening, and we bless each and every one of them and their churches in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank y'all, and we'll probably be back maybe in a few months with a licensure, a copyright webinar perhaps. So if you know experts in that area, send them my way. Thank you.
Thank you,
God
guys.
bless.
Appreciate it.